Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another session of the 15th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales, I'm your moderator. This particular session is a pathway forward, researching, developing, and implementing training for faculty, teaching, and graduate programs. We have with us Megan Hall from St. Francis University. She's an instructional designer in the Center for Excellence, excuse me, Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Prior to joining St. Francis in January of 2020, she spent 7 years teaching music at a middle school in Pennsylvania. Oh, great, music. Megan, wait, teaching music, what do you mean? You mean instruments, singing?
All of the above. Yeah, I was the music teacher at the middle school, so it was chorus, band, general music, marching band, you name it. I was doing it.
Well, great. Hey, maybe at the end we can do a sing along.
Perhaps. Anybody know any good Valentine's Day songs?
Well, let me turn it over to you, Megan. It's all yours.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for the opportunity to present today, and thanks to everyone who joined the session today. As Bob said, my name is Megan Hall. I work at St. Francis University in our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning as an instructional designer. And if you're not familiar with St. Francis, it's a Catholic university that's in very rural Pennsylvania with approximately 3,000 students in total, including both undergrad and graduate students. And today I'd like to share with you the process that we took to develop training for faculty that would be teaching in our new Executive Doctor of Education in Organizational Leadership and Innovation program. So this is not a plug for that program, but rather an overview of how our center was involved. And I am going to be discussing the specifics with everyone today about the training that we developed. But my hope is that you can walk away from this session with some of your own ideas or inspiration for how you might incorporate this type of faculty training at your institution. So in the chat, if you would oblige, if you could let everybody know what institution you're from and maybe what your job title is, so that I can get to know you a little bit better. Hello, Michelle and Elena. Okay, instructional technologist, another instructional designer. Okay, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing that information. Worcester, gotcha. And the second thing in the chat, if you could answer either A, B, C, D, or E. Does your institution currently offer training for faculty teaching in graduate programs, specifically graduate programs? Both A and B are yeses. A is more of there's a lot of opportunities available. The B response would be that there's some, but maybe room to grow. C, maybe your institution doesn't have something, but you might be currently planning for it. D, you don't offer this at all. And E, if you're not sure. So lots of Bs, interesting. For those of you that answered B, what are some of the opportunities available for training for graduate faculty? You can just answer in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. Okay. Online pedagogy for online teaching. That's great. Now, Kristen, is that specific to graduate faculty or is it for any faculty at the institution? Gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing. And if you're still typing, go ahead and enter your responses. From Kate, faculty development of pedagogy, online instruction, universal design. Yes, absolutely. And same question, Kate, is it faculty development kind of across the board or is it specific to graduate faculty? Across the board. Very nice. Thank you. So today's agenda, I'm going to briefly take you through the background and overview of how all of this graduate faculty training for our EDD program came about. And that will hopefully set the stage to explain what the needs were and a little bit of insight into why we proceeded in the manner that we did. So then I'll walk you through the research, development, and implementation, which are kind of the main steps of the project, as well as how the evaluation of the training played and plays a role. And lastly, just some final thoughts that I have and a chance for you to ask questions, which are welcome throughout the presentation. I do have the chat box up that I can monitor. So as I had mentioned earlier, in the fall of 2022, SFU launched its first research doctorate, the Executive Doctor of Education and Organizational Leadership and Innovation. And this was through Francis Worldwide, which you can think of kind of as our global campus. And it was a big deal for the university because it's the first research doctorate that we've ever offered. And the desire for it was just to have all of the pieces fall together seamlessly with all of the stakeholders that were involved in launching the program. It is structured for working professionals. So that would be your adult learners who are working most likely full-time. And I believe in the first cohort that we have now, the ages range from 20s to the 60s. So it's truly a wide gamut of participants, and some that are maybe recently finishing a master's degree that are moving on to doctorate level, or maybe in the case of some of those in the 60s, they're finally coming back to school to earn their doctorate. And it's important to understand that this program is all online. So the courses are online in Canvas, and then each semester there's one in-person residency that's led by the faculty teaching in the program. And so the need, once this was decided to launch the program, is that there needed to be training. And so the past VPAA and also the past and present dean of Francis Worldwide had proposed this new program. And throughout that proposal, there was a desire for the faculty to be trained specifically in teaching adult students. And that was more or less the only direction that we got, minus a few other things. So it was kind of like, hey, CETL, we want you to develop and manage this training. You can do whatever you see fit, which was kind of cool for us. It was a nice project that we got to work on. And so there, in our CETL, we have a team of instructional designers. There's 3 of us. We also have our academic compliance specialist and our assistant dean of academic quality assessment and compliance. And I can tell you the instructional designers did the vast majority of the work in this project, but we were all involved in some way or another. And we also knew from the beginning that we wanted the training to be led via Canvas because the courses were online. So we sort of wanted to mimic that experience of taking an online course, so to speak, for their training. And all of this started for us in fall 2021. So that takes us into the research portion of the project. And given that most of us in the CETL don't have our doctorate, or it's like graduate faculty training isn't really in our wheelhouse of skills specifically, the first thing we wanted to do was just look for exemplars and just see what other institutions were doing, what was available to us, because we were given the directive that if we needed to purchase something, that would be fine. So we just kind of browsed everything that we could possibly think of. And so the leading questions are, what are other institutions doing? Is there a well-respected pre-made training that we can purchase? And what have our own faculty experienced? So we started with browsing the sites of other institutions and organizations, looking at teaching center web pages, help support pages, faculty pages, even blog posts, and essays or articles written by faculty at various universities. We also looked at journal articles, specifically, of course, scholarly journal articles, where we looked at meta-analyses specifically and other types of research studies, again, just to kind of see what was out there, what was being talked about in the literature. And for books, we looked at a lot of different textbooks, monographs, and collected works, a lot of it having to do with adult learning theory. And the pre-developed training, we looked for anything from workshops to courses that could be purchased or taken, certifications at different institutions, and like I said before, possibly even training that would be customized that we could purchase ourselves. And then lastly, anyone that I knew that was either getting a doctorate or had a doctorate, I tried to engage in a conversation with them just about whether or not they had received any kind of training at other institutions that they may have taught at. And I did that just through personal communication of conversations and emails. So all of that information was collected in a Word document, and we just kept adding to it with a summary of the different resources that we found. And when we kind of paused on the research and looked at what we had so far, there were 4 main conclusions that we came to. The first is that there are various types of graduate faculty training that exist. This is not something new. But what we also found was that what we found was not one size fits all. It wasn't something that we could specifically take from another institution or take from an organization and make it work for our institution. So it was something we kind of realized was probably going to have to be homegrown, so to speak. We also found that there's not a lot of graduate faculty training opportunities specific to graduate faculty. So it exists, but it's not widespread. And what we did find was that the training that was available was limited in terms of being hands-on. So a lot of it might have just been watching this webinar and submitting like a reflection paper or a journal, something like that. And because we found limited examples of this, we knew we wanted to do our best to make this as hands-on of a training as possible. So we kept going and we kept researching. We went back to things that we had already researched. We used new keywords in our searches to try to find more information, just generally just get a bigger picture of what we were up against, so to speak. So from that research, we were able to identify some themes. And in the chat, before I sort of reveal what those themes are, what topics would you expect or should be included in graduate faculty training? And this can be very broad, educated guesses are welcome. In the chat, what topics should be included or what would you expect to see? Mm-hmm. Yes, research specifically, given it's a research doctorate, very important. Feedback, yes, absolutely. I attended some good sessions at this conference about feedback and some different strategies for making it effective. And that's certainly one of those like across the gamut kinds of things. But in graduate education, the feedback might be a little bit different, might be a little bit more personalized. Engagement, absolutely. Yeah, Michelle brings up a good point about flexibility for working adults. Building it into the course so it works around their schedules and works for what they need specifically and what they need to get out of a course or a program. Any other thoughts on what topics might be included? Emphasis on building professional connections and professional development. Absolutely. So here are the themes that we came up with. And I believe there were more themes, but these were the ones that were most relevant to the 3 training modules I'm going to talk about. So this one probably is no surprise, setting clear expectations for each course and class. Making sure that you include discussion, because adult students very often have a lot of experiences and ideas that they want to share. And very often the discussion can and maybe even should be student-led. The idea of incorporating authentic experiences is really important for adults. Andragogy tells us that. And like someone had mentioned in the chat, lots of opportunities to research, evaluate, synthesize information, and get lots of feedback on that process. And in some cases, even integrating publishing and teaching skills for students. I don't know if that's going to be something that comes out of the woodwork for the program that we have now, but that is a very important component in many doctorate programs. And lastly, promoting collaboration and cooperative learning, just getting people to build community and get a chance to work with each other and build their own knowledge. So now we've entered the development stage, and this is where we kind of took all of the research and the themes that we had found, and we said, okay, how are we going to organize this into a training? And so for each one of those themes, we wrote specific measurable, or I should say broad and measurable training goals. And more or less for each theme, we wrote an individual goal. And then what we did was from those goals, we decided how it was going to be organized into different modules. So module 1, designing learning experience for doctoral level learners, was mostly involved in adult learning theory and what kinds of learning experiences adults are looking for. In module 2 was facilitating discussions and collaboration. And module 3, guiding student research and writing. As we all know, that's a very important part of doctoral level courses. Okay, so what resources, activities, and/or assessments would you expect to be included in each one of these modules? So in the chat for the first one, here you can see module 1, designing learning experiences for doctoral level learners. And then I give you 3 topics: the adult learner, needs assessment and backward design, and authentic assessments. So what comes to mind when you think of what types of resources, activities, assessments might be included in something like this? You can let me know in the chat. Yeah, Michelle, that's a really good point. Graduate level learning outcomes, really high level learning outcomes, absolutely. What else might we expect to see in terms of resources, activities, or assessments? Peer review, yeah, Alina, that's a really good point. And that helps to build community collaboration and just getting used to the process of editing when it comes to the dissertation. Okay, so I'll get you started in module 1. So For these three topics, we felt it was most effective for the adult learner portion to include videos and readings about the adult learner, just so the faculty could learn more about the characteristics of the adult learner, and also a discussion where they were able to share their own experiences as an adult learner. And then for the needs assessment and backward design, we decided we wanted it to kind of go along with this idea of authentic assessment. So they had to create their own needs assessment. And I believe the faculty that were enrolled all did a survey, like a pre-survey that they would send out to their students just to get to know them a little bit and get an idea of what their backgrounds are. And then again, sticking with the authentic assessment, we wanted them to design an authentic assessment for their course, something that they might want to include whenever the course is offered down the road. So now that you have an idea, let's try again in the chat for Module 2, facilitating discussions and collaboration. 2 topics, leading a seminar and establishing community. What might you expect to see? And like I said, educated guesses are welcome. Michelle says, create a discussion board at the graduate level. Yeah, and Michelle, I'm assuming you mean like the different prompts that you would include and what the requirements would be. Yeah, absolutely. Asynchronous discussion-based assignment where they're providing feedback to each other. Yeah, that's a really great idea. How to keep discussions going and using higher order thinking skills. Yes, definitely at the graduate level. So what we ended up having them do, again, just to learn about some background knowledge about leading a discussion and establish community. They watched some videos, did some readings. There was also a podcast episode that I included. And we actually had a live synchronous session. Even though the courses are all online, some faculty may have wanted to incorporate like a weekly live session. And as we all know, leading a discussion in Zoom is very different than leading it in person. So the live synchronous session was meant for them to discuss a topic of their choice related to the training, and then lead roughly a 10 to 15-minute discussion on that, using some of the techniques that were discussed specifically for leading a seminar, such as making sure that it's student-centered. And then the last part for establishing community, I had them redesign an activity to be collaborative. So I gave, and they worked in groups in Zoom when they did this. So I gave them a really basic activity like read an article or write a paper. And they were asked to redesign that to be more collaborative. And then we returned to the main room in Zoom and just kind of discussed everything and discussed our ideas. Okay, lastly in the chat, Module 3, guiding student research and writing. 2 topics are scholarly thinking. You can just think of that as thinking like a scholar, thinking like an academic, and feedback. So what kinds of resources, activities, or assessments might you see? Elena says, showcase what meaningful feedback looks like, use of different modes like videos, annotations. Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like at the time for the feedback, I gave them feedback on their feedback, you'll see. What else might we expect to see? Can they compose a scholarly piece of writing? Yeah, absolutely, because thinking like a scholar also involves writing like a scholar and being able to research. So the resources and activities involved, more readings specifically because this scholarly thinking was a term, a concept that I borrowed from a book that I'm going to discuss at the end. And then in the collaborative chart, we shared many different scholarly thinking strategies and concepts that might be incorporated into your everyday course. And then lastly, for the feedback, I actually gave them the introduction section of a published and publicly available dissertation and had them provide feedback based on that, even though it was, polished, published dissertation, provide feedback on that. And then I was able to give them feedback on their feedback and kind of get them to think about where else they could have given their thoughts to the student. And all of this was meant to be authentic because adult learning theory tells us, like I said before, that authentic assessments, meaningful experiences, those are what adults are looking for. And so we wanted to make the training as authentic as possible, make sure that they could leave this training with kind of like a toolbox of things that they could implement in their own courses. If you're familiar with the movie Inception, I think the premise of the movie is you're able to implant thinking in someone else's mind without them knowing. And so I kind of wanted to make sure I was practicing what I was preaching as we developed the training so that it was as authentic as possible. Also part of our development stage was creating a common template that was used not only for the courses in the program, but also what was used when developing and building the training in Canvas for the faculty. So we started with the homepage, and I know as instructional designers, there's a lot of us in this meeting today. This was kind of like the really fun part. We had a really good time going through a lot of this. So on the homepage, we made a banner specific to this program with the help of our marketing department, as well as buttons for the relevant information in the course. We also put a spot for course description, as well as a little meet your instructor area where they could see a picture, the contact information, and even an area where the instructor could put a welcome message or an introduction of themselves. And then near the bottom, we had a link for the syllabus, and then the instructor could put in a skeleton outline of their course schedule so that students could just see what was coming up at a quick glance. We also wanted the modules to look consistent in terms of navigation and clarity. So for each module, we made sure that there was a title and an overview page, and then we used the indenting or nesting to try to show relationships between the content. And then for each one of these items, so the page, discussion, quiz, assignment, we made templates for those items. And this example is one of our page templates. And so what we tried to make sure that we did was include headers. And in this case, we used what's called a PIL in HTML, where we were able to list the estimated time for that particular activity. Again, and this goes back to the idea that the students are working full time. They need basically extreme clarity. They need to be able to schedule all of their work within their personal obligations. So it was really important that we put estimated time here. And then we also had a place in many of the pages for videos, and we put placeholders in here so that faculty could see what kind of the final product would look like, and ways that you could format the page. So now all the big work has been done. We've researched, we've developed, we've built everything. Now it's finally time to implement. And we did this in summer 2022 with the first 4 faculty teaching in the EDD program to get them prepared to teach in fall 2022. So the first 4 faculty, 2 completed the training in the time allotted, and those were the 2 faculty that were teaching in fall 2022. 1 is still in progress, and that person is actually teaching in the second half of this spring semester. And then we did have 1 withdraw because that faculty was no longer going to be teaching for the program. It was all designed to be asynchronous in Canvas, minus that 1 live session that I briefly mentioned. Largely a work at your own pace kind of thing. The modules could be completed in any order. They would all make sense. And we used a mastery grading approach, which we mostly utilize for providing feedback. So the mastery grading was based on a 2-point scale. If they got a 0 out of 2, it either meant that they didn't submit something or it was just totally not what we were looking for. A 1 out of 2 meant they got some in-depth feedback from me, and I maybe asked them to resubmit to get a 2 out of 2. And then if they got a 2 out of 2, they were on par with what we were looking for. So again, that was mostly used as a feedback mechanism more than grading. And in approximately 5 weeks, that was the time that we gave them to complete. But as you can see, flexibility was necessary since we still have 1 person in progress. And as the training was going on for those 5 weeks, really my job was just to monitor Canvas and participate in things like the discussion or the collaborative chart as needed. And like I said, provide feedback. So that takes us then to the ongoing evaluation. We created a form that was available after the final activity. And in the form were 7 Likert scale questions. And since we only had 2 faculty so far that have completed the training, we don't have a lot of data, but 1 person did respond strongly agree for all questions, and 1 person responded all agree for all of the questions, which is a good thing. So I was really happy to see that, even though there were only 2 data sets. And then we also had 2 open-ended questions where the faculty could just give us feedback on a specific area that we were looking for and offer any comments that they may have. There was also a little bit of personal communication involved in the evaluation, mostly through email or even through the phone. One of the quotes from the 1 faculty member who finished was, "My courses are more well-structured with learning materials and assignments that make the best use of online resources. Ultimately, the students have a much better experience." So that kind of just encompasses how that particular faculty member felt about the training. So looking ahead, this is why this is kind of an ongoing evaluation. We are going to be training 2 faculty that are going to be teaching in summer 2023. So that training will actually start in roughly a month or 2. And one thing that I know I'm going to revise just based on the dynamics, I guess, of the group, I'm going to revise the live session requirement because it was really hard to schedule with everybody in the summer, especially, or even in the spring whenever everyone's busy. So I think I'm going to make this more of a one-on-one meeting where it's kind of like a "what do you need from me" meeting. So we can do Zoom training, we can talk about some different discussion techniques, and just make it a little bit more of a personal connection rather than with everybody, despite part of the reason having the live session was for collaborative purposes. And then one piece that you may be kind of wondering, there is a huge part of mentoring and advising in doctoral programs. This was kind of like our module 4 of what we were going to be covering, but the current director / dean of Francis Worldwide of the program said that that was going to be something that she kind of took care of. So we didn't worry too much about that, but that is certainly an important piece in training for graduate faculty, without a doubt. So I have some final thoughts, mostly on this book, which I can't speak highly enough of. There are not words in the English vocabulary for me to tell you how much and how wonderful this book is. So this was kind of like the key resource. It's called An Online Doctorate for Researching Professionals, Program Design, Implementation, and Evaluation. And what the authors, Swapna Kumar and Kara Dawson, did was describe the design, implementation, and evaluation of one of their doctorate programs at the University of Florida. And the nice thing about the book is it's completely open, it's Creative Commons, you can literally download the PDF. I actually printed out my own book, and it literally takes you through the theory. They base the program on theory, research, and I forget what the third one, practice, theory, practice, and research, whatever order that goes in. And they just kind of outlined, again, the design, implementation, evaluation with those three things in mind. And that includes things like the scholarly thinking. That was the concept I borrowed the most from this book. The mentoring and advising, discussion techniques, just all kinds of different things that they discussed. And what was nice about this was it sort of gave us a final product of what you would want a doctorate program to look like and to how to function. So it was nice for us to be able to build the training kind of backwards from that point and say, okay, here's the training that we want to offer. How do we get them to this point where as faculty, they are functioning successfully in an online doctorate program? Okay, so that's a wrap for me in terms of the presentation, but I'd love to continue the discussion. So in the chat or unmute, what questions or comments would you like to pose? Or final thoughts, comments, anything that you want to bring up? And while maybe some of you are typing, I do want to mention, feel free to reach out to me. If this is something that you wanted to implement at your institution, I'd be happy to kind of be like a mentor in that area and point you directly to some of the resources that we found. Thanks, Alina. Any questions or comments from anyone? Graduate student teachers, junior faculty, and adjunct faculty often have to teach materials prepared for them. Did you have any recommendation for preparing faculty for this kind of teaching? Not specifically, only because in our institution, it's very much you develop your own course. So at the program level, you hopefully have goals and objectives that you need to meet, but then you're kind of given the academic freedom to develop that course as you see fit. So that was not something that was part of our training, but I'm with you, Javier, because I read a lot about how, like you said, graduate student teachers or junior faculty are often involved in the teaching process at a doctoral level. So I could see that being an important component of like, how do you support graduate student teachers and junior faculty? So that's a really good question. Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, we're a couple minutes ahead, so I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone wanted to have further conversation.
That sounds fine.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I appreciated it.
Hey, Megan. I unfortunately missed. I got a call, but
No big deal.
I I was wondering if there's anything that any considerations you took into account specifically for this program as being an EdD program. So it is a research doctorate, but it's not a PhD program. So I wonder if there are skills and competencies that you would orient differently for an EdD program than for a PhD program.
Yeah, and like you said, that's kind of the main difference is the research component, or a large difference. So knowing with this training that it was for an EDD program that was specifically for working professionals, that's kind of how we tailored the training, especially in terms of like the authentic assessment, the experiential learning. Those are really important qualities to focus on for the training. If it was a PhD, I think there would just be a much broader focus on research and writing, as well as probably publishing, if I had to guess. I'm not a person who has a doctorate myself, but I can imagine that would have been a much heavier focus, and what types of research could be done, and actually practicing research and writing about it and getting lots of feedback.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that point, that there is going to be, there should be more of an experiential component. And I do think that it's important for authentic assessments and even in PhD courses, but
Sure.
there's this element of that the EdD is more oriented towards, in general, EdD programs are oriented towards working professionals who needs some level of research, but they don't really need the PhD level of research.
Right. Well, Bob,